Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining in. Welcome to the first Atma webinar of the fiscal. My name is Devina Nigam, for especially those of you that are meeting for the first time. Nice to see some of you. Like I said, my name is Devina Nigam. I am a consultant at Atma. Atma is an accelerator that supports NGOs to become bigger, better, stronger by building capacities and creating systems and processes to solve organizational development issues they may face. We started our journey in 2007 and since then have supported more than 85 organizations in their journey of excellence. Atma Webinar is a curated platform that started in 2017, where speakers share their practical experiences and knowledge that could benefit other NGOs. The topics usually range from anything related to program management, finance, human resource management, technology, essentially any pressing topic that affects us as a whole, as a sector. Those are the topics we talk about. In today's webinar, we will reflect on the importance of inclusion of technology, along with some of the misconceptions that are prevalent in the sector. We will also focus on the already existing resources, their usefulness, and how can they be integrated into an organization's systems and processes. The three key takeaways that we all can look to end the session with. One, the readiness and preparation to use technology solutions as individual organizations. How ready are we? We should be able to answer some of those questions ourselves. Leveraging community and existing resources and commonly used open sources and commercial tools for available to NGOs. Our speaker today is Vinod Rajasekaran. Vinod works as a fractional CXO at Project Tech for Dev to deliver impact to NGOs using technology as an enabler and force multiplier. Vinod is passionate about leveraging the power of data for impactful storytelling and increasing program efficiencies. His work on the development data platform is directed towards helping nonprofits devise actionable insights from their data with an easy-to-use platform for streamlining organizational data. Welcome, Vinod. Before I hand it over to you, I do want to just share a few rules, requests, request all attendees to kindly stay muted through the webinar. Please note down your questions, your comments. You can put it in the chat box. We will be taking them up in our Q&A section towards the end of the webinar. If at any point in time Vinod feels he'd like to invite a question, we leave that to him as well. Thirdly, and important, the session is being recorded. The recording will be shared with all of you via an email. We will also be sharing Vinod's email ID with all of you for you to connect with him should you have any questions. So do look out for both of these things. With that, handing it over to you, Vinod.
Thanks, Devina. Thanks for folks at Atma for making this happen. So before I get started, so a little bit of a difference to what Devina was talking about. We do have people from the Tech for Dev team. So some of the chat questions, if they're ready to answer and if it's short enough, they will answer directly on there or provide input for taking it up further. We will take up questions and I'm going to stop. It's a 1 hour thing. I don't want it to be a full long presentation. So we will stop probably every 15 minutes at least or so. And we will take up questions on stuff that we have done. So it's not full long looking at presentation the whole way. So with that, I'll kind of get a little bit started. And we'll start off with just giving an introduction to Project Tech for Dev and what we do, we are essentially a technology partner for the social sector. And in that framework, all the technology things that we work, whether it be consulting, developing platforms, all of those are only oriented towards the social sector. So in that regard, some of the things that we see on our end and where we see there is a gap between in the technology sector and how technology is used in social sector, particularly, is a lot of these things which are mentioned here. But the prime component, one of the things that we see really lacking, two big ones, and then I'll talk about the other ones which kind of follow through. The first one is on strategy. And a lot of times what happens is a lot of organizations are very well set in their program strategy. They understand what they want to do. They understand what they are doing on the social side. They get, this is what I need to do. I understand my program, but then how do I implement this when I want to actually use technology? And that becomes quite a difficult challenge. There is lack of maybe a skill set. Who do I contact? How do I get my tech going? What do I do? So there's a lot of questions on how to make that happen. The second other big thing, which I don't have any magic bullets today, is on people. Technology people, very difficult to find, retain across the social sector. We feel your pain. We have the same thing, even though we are primarily all technology folks. Even for us, hiring is a really big challenge, and that's something that's quite difficult across the entire social sector. The other thing, going back to strategy, is about solutions. And a lot of times what we also see is technology solutions can be expensive to build. A lot of times people build something with some preconception of what they want to achieve. And then within 6 months, they're like, and we need to change this. We need to iterate. And then over a year plus and things, they feel, oh, we need to maintain the software and make more changes. And that becomes quite costly, difficult, lots of involvement with vendors, managing change, dealing with the quality of the actual software that is implemented. So that, again, is a very big challenge in terms of how technology solutions get implemented and pushed out. The other big one is, as more and more organizations go towards evidence-based interventions, what we also see is that there is a lot of data being now collected, especially over the last few years with COVID, with easy mobile data collection tools. We see a lot of data being collected in the social sector, but the data practices that are being followed in terms of security of the data, in terms of privacy of the data, those are more kind of afterthoughts. We don't think of those in the first place, but think of them as later, we will figure it out. But again, one of our kind of things that we really ask NGOs to do is to think through the whole data collection. Think through what do you need to collect for your programs and figure out, is it important for me to collect? And for example, I'll give you, like lots of times I have seen in multiple cases where an Aadhaar ID is collected and it's not even complete a lot of times. Maybe 50% of Aadhaar data is collected. Whether it's used or not, there's actually no real usage. They collect mobile phones to be able to contact them. But now what this means is that you are now retaining personal identifiable information on your end, which you might not have needed to in the first place. So just a lot of some of the problems that we are seeing. On our end, what are we doing in that space in terms of trying to say, how do we provide some solutions for some of those problems? We're not going to basically be able to alleviate all the problems, but to try to see what can be achieved. And from that perspective, we think of ourselves as a community partner, where we are wanting to have a community of network of nonprofits, software companies that primarily work in the social sector, funders, and have that space where people are able to leverage their peer networks. That's one of the biggest things that we really want to happen. And that's what we always push ourselves towards trying to achieve that by making software connects, by being able to provide at any point of time, somebody has questions on what should I do? Trying to have those initial 30-minute conversations to kind of push people towards the right track. And we're not telling you that we have all the answers, but we can probably tell you maybe these are the things that you should think about. The answers are difficult, but at least we can kind of try to help you to ask the right questions that will probably drive you in what you're going to achieve. And then in that regard, over the last few years, what we have also tried to do is where there are niches where we think platforms would be useful, that would be easy to use for nonprofits. We have aimed to basically develop those platforms. So a couple of platforms that we have done and we are working on. One is Cliffic, which is at the user side, it is a no-code WhatsApp chatbot builder. So if you are wanting to use WhatsApp to communicate with your end user communities, then you can use this no-code platform to basically communicate with them using WhatsApp business APIs and use that as a conversational medium. The other one that we are also presently developing is the development data platform, which aims to basically for organizations which deal with a lot of data to how best to pull data from different places that they are collecting. Could be from your survey tool, could be from WhatsApp, could be from IVR surveys, and trying to put all of those together becomes a challenging aspect of it. And so we basically provide the tools for that to be able to help happen. Atma is another platform that we have designed for data collection. So just to give you a fair idea of a few of the platforms that we work on. The other big thing that we do is what we call as a fractional CXO. It's basically having people who would come in as a CTO or a chief data officer and help provide strategy and technology advising and guidance to the people in the NGOs. And the idea behind doing that is we would be able to have people who have worked in industry for 15, 20 years, provide NGOs with that ability to be able to use those strategy and guidance at where they're not having a need for it full time. So if you have smaller NGOs, a lot of times the technology needs might be more limited, and this would help you to get started, or maybe if you're having problems, to maybe write some courses, do some of those things, and that's where fractional CXOs work. Typically, a fractional CXO will work for 2 or 3 NGOs at a time and spread the work that they do across them. So we'll start off just with looking at the session topics, and we'll take a little bit of a breather right after that. We're going to take a look at some technology misconceptions that exist with the people and on how we perceive technology for the social sector. We'll also look at what we truly believe in terms of technology strategy, having to come from program and organizational strategy as the drivers for it. And then we'll go into the main segue of our whole presentation, which would be primarily on build, never, almost. That kind of is the message that we want you all to take back from this webinar. If there was one message, that would be it. It's almost never build. Try to see if you can reuse what somebody has built. Go ahead and buy stuff, whether it be open source or a SaaS platform. You're probably going to be in a much better state of than to start from a build situation. There are cases where a build makes sense, but truly understand why you are doing that. And for most of us, the build probably never makes sense. I would probably say maybe 1% of the cases you should be in a custom build situation. We'll also kind of take you through a little bit of leveraging community and existing resources, and we'll give you a look at some of communities across WhatsApp, discourse channels, some forums that could be useful. And at the end of it, we'll also pass this on back to Davina and others at Atma so that they can forward it to the rest of the group. So we'll take a stop at this point, and actually we're going to do a small pulse check. So if you should see in your chat window, you should see a menti.com link. Would love for people to just go in there. You should be able to put in a couple of things about what are the biggest technology challenges that kind of resonates with you if you think about it today. Would be nice to see where we are at. And kind of see if we can reflect that through the rest of this webinar. So I'll take a couple of minutes, and if people can get kind of going into the web link on the chat, we can take a look at what so we'll still take a couple of minutes. I see some things about maintenance, usability, budget and cost comes up. So if you haven't put in 1 or 2 words, that would be nice if you could go in and put it so that we can kind of think about if we can address those too. Take another minute if folks, if you are online and if you would like to put a few more, that would be nice to see. Okay. So there's some things on technology adoption, some things on flexibility, usability, customization, data capture. We'll give it another 30 seconds more, and we'll kind of talk through maybe a couple of the really big ticket items there, and then maybe we can have a couple of questions, and then we'll take more questions at the end. Okay, if anybody wants to pipe up on, I'm looking at budget and cost, seems like a big factor for a lot of people. Would love some input if you had any particular thoughts on that, especially if you put those in as some of your biggest challenges. Feel free to unmute yourself and ask questions or comments or your input. Okay. All right. We'll, I don't see any questions or anybody wants to feedback, so we'll leave it at that. But we will address budget and costs, and what we think of it is actually one of our technology misconceptions that we at least think of. So we'll go back to the presentation back again, and maybe we'll have more questions from people as we go through. So we'll talk about what we consider as some of the 4 big technology misconceptions. The first big one, big elephant in the room, lots of people come in to technology saying technology is a solution. And for us, I know that we are a technology partner, but the biggest thing that we think of is technology is not going to be a solution. It will enable you, but it's not your solution. If you don't have a good idea of what your programs need to be, what your organization strategy needs to be, and how you are going to do it, whatever you choose as your technology solution is only going to take you in places that you don't want to be in. You're probably going to choose something, go forward, and then you're going to iterate back, you're going to go to another one. And for us, what we always feel is figure out first program and organization strategy. Figure out what you are really doing, and then use technology to enable that. Don't come in with saying, oh, I saw this cool thing that this NGO is doing, can we do that too? That's not really going to help you. What you really want to be thinking is, oh, I really want to do this in this program. How do I do that with technology? And that for us is like the biggest thing, because that also allows us, when we come into those conversations, to really help, because we really understand where you're coming in from a program aspect. The second one, we get this question asked a lot of times in a lot of our meetings, any face-to-face meetings, on whether small grassroots organizations should look at technology. And the way we look at it primarily is that as long as you have good processes, and that's really the biggest thing that we look for. If you have good processes, we feel you're ready for technology. And what that means is you know what you're going to do. You understand what you're going to do. That means you can push that on the technology. That's going to help you with different things. It could be helping you with the actual program. It could be helping your field level workers. So in multiple different ways, you can have technology help you, but think of it more as like, I have my process. I might be just a very small NGO. I might just have 10 people working with me. That's okay. You can still use technology a lot. The third one is on funders being hesitant to pay for technology. So this one comes up a lot in terms of the budget, the amount of money it costs for technology. And we can tell you that technology most of the times is not cheap. Technology development is even more expensive. If you buy platforms-based, SaaS-based, subscription-based solutions, they might be a little bit cheaper. Technology development, a lot of times, might seem like it might be cheaper because you can get, sometimes developers are cheap, but then you also get what you pay for. You might end up with a product that's not of good quality, and that would take enormous amount of time and expense for you to maintain later on. So our recommendations usually is, when you are asking for funding for your programs, bundle your technology into the cost that you're asking your funders, and be very explicit in what you're asking it for. Tell them what you're going to use your technology for, not just say technology 10% I'm going to do of whatever money that you would ask for a program. But a lot of times we feel when funders know what you're going to be using that technology for and what that money is going to be used for, we have not really seen so much pushback when it comes to funding. If you are able to clearly elucidate a case for it, most of the time we feel like funder misgivings go away in terms of why we would spend so much on technology. The last one is a big one that we kind of will reinforce over the whole presentation, is on custom solutions. On these ones, we feel for the most time, as I mentioned earlier, I probably will be repeating myself a few times through this presentation, build almost never. Try to, as much as possible, buy, whether it be open source, SaaS platforms. Most of the times, lots of us think our problems are unique, but most likely, I would probably guess 80 to 90% of our problems are covered by what somebody probably has already worked on before. And if you can get to 80, 90% of the solution in very quick time, you're probably doing a very good job. So this one is a little bit of a roadmap on implementing technology, and we have kind of talked through a little bit already of some of these things, but I'll just go through a little bit of some of the things that we have not touched on, so you have an idea of what all you should be thinking about. We've touched on a little bit, starting out with organization and program strategy, and then a tech strategy. One thing we didn't really talk too much about is on the tech strategy is on really having a good set of requirements and driving that towards whatever you are going to want your technology tools to address. This is one thing that we see consistently a lot of times. Requirements are ever changing. It's almost like a very big moving target. When that happens, it's really hard to pick a technology tool. So what we usually recommend is at least get together where you can say, hey, these are my major goals, and these are my must-haves that I need to have. And there will always be a lot of nice to haves. And if you are able to really put together those must-haves, then you are ready for your tech solutions. In which case you can go in and say, hey, can I go look at all the solutions that are possible, that are already existing? Can I see if all my must-haves are addressed? If you go in with a full bucket list of everything that could be there, what you're going to likely find is no solution is probably going to exist. But if you go in with a reduced set saying, hey, these are my must-haves that I absolutely need to have, then you're probably very, very likely to find an existing solution. And then we say, okay, I've found the solution now, what do I do? We say, you think for scale, but you start small. You start small in implementing, you start small in delivering to your users. And in that way, your commitments are lesser. And it also allows you to iterate figure out how users will use the system, how they are thinking, and then you can go faster. But if you go all the way down a certain way and then you find that it's not going to work, then it becomes quite difficult. So thinking small, implement small while you think big. So think, when you start thinking, think about it like, I need this to cover, let's say 1,000 users or more. But then when you implement and push out initially, push it to a smaller section so you can kind of iterate much faster. The other big one that kind of always gets lost is on the sustainability part. How do you plan for support? How do you plan for all your documentation? How do you plan for training? So these three ones, even though I have it put together, kind of seems like after implementation, but again, these should be a critical part of your planning, and during implementation, you are thinking of these and you are doing all of these. Their users are getting trained. If you need support for users, if you need support on your end, if you need support from vendors, if you need documentation from your vendors, if you need to create self-documentation for yourself, all of these should be in concert with you pushing this out to the users. So again, really something to think about. And then I would probably say almost like 100% of the time, your first version software is not going to be a final version. Always assume that your technology is going to iterate. There's probably, by the time you start by the time you get there, you probably have a little bit newer requirements. Some things have changed. Maybe something has changed in your program, maybe change in the way your workforce is working. So all of those different things, you are going to need to iterate and plan for that in terms of your budgets. So this one will go over quite a bit. I'm going to initially talk a little bit about why use platforms, and then a little bit about program platforms, and then I'll have a colleague of mine, Piali, who's also another fractional CXO. She'll talk more about tech tools for internal IT use, a lot more. So we'll start off with platforms and why we really think platforms are the best way for most NGOs to go through. There will always be extreme cases where platforms are not going to work. But for most part, for probably 90–95% of the cases, you will have, if you look close enough, a platform that matches probably a lot of your requirements. The biggest advantage of it for yourself is you can deploy very fast. You can implement really fast. So you can take a platform and be up and running very quickly compared to the point of finding developers, finding a company that can do it, giving them all the requirements, making sure they are on the same page, getting them to implement it, and going through significant amount of time to do that. The other big thing is when you develop software, you're developing for one person. When you are in a platform, it's being developed for a lot of users, different organizations, and you are getting the power of the community where you are getting multiple organizations testing, reporting bugs, and all of those things happening at the same time. And a lot of times also, again, with like security, privacy, I would probably think most platforms do a better job than an independent individual developer or a set of developers. And a lot of times that's also like for security and privacy, most of the times that's kind of the last thing that a lot of individual developers will look at. While invariably for platforms, that's more looked at, more also from a legal perspective. The other big thing is a low-cost failure option, because you can essentially get to the point to say, okay, I've got this thing, it validates my requirements, I'm going to go try it, and I'm going to try to get it to work. And you can do that, get started, and have a very quick, easy monthly subscription and try it out. So it's a very cheap way to try out the platform and see if it will work for you. I won't go too much into detail. Again, we'll provide you this presentation, so you can look at the links on it. And all of these are hyperlinked to all the different software. So these ones show different software platforms that exist for data preparation, for data visualization, and then for CRMs, for application frameworks. A lot of them are open source frameworks. Some of them are paid subscription models. Irrespective of whether they are open source that are hosted by somebody and where you pay for the hosting, or whether it's actually a closed source product, a lot of times these are going to be much better off than starting from scratch. With that, I will hand off to Piali, who's going to take us through some of the available platforms for office automation.
Thank you, Vinod. In this section, I'll just talk about some office automation platforms. So to start with, we have HRMS platforms. We have listed just a few, and there are many available apart from these few that we have listed. Among this, Orange HRM is one of the open software platform, but the rest are closed source and hosted platforms. But yeah, these are some of the HRMS platform that's available. Next, okay, for survey and data collection, I'm sure many of you are already using Google Forms, Kobo Toolbox. Apart from Google and Kobo, there's Arm Digital, Avni, Service C2, and Inform that's available, and many others that are not even here. So next, Vinod. Okay, in terms of the ERP softwares, there's Zoho Creator and ERP Next. And using these two platforms, these are no code or zero code platform, and you can create your custom workflows and processes and manage all of that. In terms of website, there's WordPress, Wix, Webflow, and many others that are available in the market. Project management, although there are many tools like Trello, Asana, Notion, and Microsoft Planner, we also think that sometimes you might not even need a fancy tool or any platform. Might be a Google Sheet might be able to do the job if your use case is simple enough and the team knows what they're looking for from this particular project management tool. So in terms of WhatsApp chatbot, Glyphic is one of the WhatsApp chatbot builder, no-code platform, no-code chatbot builder developed by Tech for Dev. So that's there. Although we are taking all these names and putting this on the PPT, we are nowhere suggesting or recommending any of the platform for your particular use case. That we cannot do until and unless we know your specific requirement and what you're trying to achieve, and then match it with one of the platform. All of the platforms have their own pros and cons, cases where they're applicable and cases where they're not. So this is nowhere a recommendation. We know the next slide. Thank you. Okay, so now here we'll talk about some of the things that you have to be very cautious before you choose a platform. One thing that I already told that Vinod also talked about, that identify the requirements before even going to evaluate or look for the software, and not do the other way. And then trying before buying. So don't rely on demos, feature documentation, or anything else. Try it out before you decide to buy any platform or to pick any platform to be used. Vinod, yeah, okay. And we also want all the NGO partners that are here on the call to be very cautious about free and pro bono services that they can get. Just be aware about the limitations, maintenance costs, the terms that are there. Like once the pro bono support is not there, what will happen then? Where is the limitation of the free plan or the trial plan that you have? Unless you are aware of them, most likely there might be a mistake that you're going to make. And the last thing, that even when you have selected the platform, just be careful while implementing. Vinod also mentioned, start small, do a pilot before rolling it org-wide, because rolling anything org-wide takes a lot of effort and it needs a lot of change management. And doing it small makes it little a control environment, and you can roll back if it's not working. And while choosing the software, make sure that your team doesn't find it too difficult or too complex to work with. If they find it too complex or too difficult to work with, then that might not be the solution for the team. Unless you have a very robust plan to combat that, like funding and team available time where they can seek external support. You don't want to choose a software that the team is not comfortable to use. So yeah, that is about the while choosing platform. Now, I'll just going to keep this slide here on this for a couple of seconds for the audience to observe. These are some of the free discounted hosted platform/services that are there for NGOs. Many of them are free, some of them are discounted. So feel free to have a look, and we'll just change the slide after a couple of seconds. And I'm going to hand it over to Vinod again. Thank you.
Thanks, Piali. So we talked a lot about like what do we do to get started with tech? How do we implement? one of the big things that we really want people to think about and push for is to leverage as much as possible your community and existing resources. Like the people here in the Atma webinar, for example, you should be able to talk to your peer networks that you see around you on this webinar, all the people that you meet on this, and be able to ask for suggestions and ask for discussions on when you get to the point where you are looking for technology tools. And for that, we say, hey, have these discussions when you know you have these requirements, and come talk to, you can always come talk to us. You're welcome to contact us through our webpage, and then we will respond. And typically, we don't charge anything. This is not like a fractional CXO program. If you have a tech question, we are totally open to answer, have a 30-minute conversation, and kind of guide you in the right way. And that's one of the things that we do for a lot of the NGOs that we work with. And we are totally open to doing that for you also. But we also have quite a few software partners that have worked with us in a lot of our ventures in the social sector. And they are well versed with a lot of the challenges in the social sector, and they could be good sounding boards for you to start off with, kind of figuring out, are you thinking of things in the right track? Are you asking the right questions? So again, they would be good resources. Another good resource is there's a couple of WhatsApp groups. The links are in the slides, and you can go post your questions, join the groups and post your questions. One of them is an IT support for NGOs, which works a lot with back office automation stuff. And then there's also a CTO for nonprofits, where you can have an initial discussion, and then based on responses, you can have further conversations. The other resources that we have seen as good starting points are, there's a discourse forum run by Tech for Good Labs. Typically, people can post their questions and get responses, and then take that forward after that. Digital Public Goods Alliance is essentially a software repository where software have been termed as digital public goods, and they can be a good, really good starting point. Typically, most goods in there, I think most, or if not all, are open source, and could be a good starting point to see what kind of software exists open source for a particular need that you might have. We've talked a lot about all the identification, the implementation, how do we go about doing it? And then there's the big challenge of, how do I manage my vendors? Always a difficult question. And for us, we always, based on our working, we have worked with software partners, we work with NGOs. So we see pain points with on both sides. And from that, this is kind of what we kind of look at it in the perspective of like the vendor management being a two-way street. There's like responsibilities and expectations on both sides. If you were to look at the NGOs, like the main things that you really want NGOs to work on would be requirements, user flows, and kind of make sure that they know how they are selecting their vendors, because that's super important to understand what am I trying to build and what should I be thinking about for those the particular technology I'm building, who would be the best vendor suited. And again, these might be things that kind of might be a little bit beyond what NGOs and what their skill sets that they might have in the organization are. And this would be a good time to leverage those community resources to basically get to the point to say, hey, what questions should I be asking? Get feedback on those and try to push those to your vendors and see what responses they come back with, and use those as your selection criteria. The other big things that we see that NGOs really have to maintain and not depend on vendors is manage change, definitely monitor vendor performance. And the other big one is managing risks. And this is something that we really have to assume that vendors might not perform very well. Don't go with the assumption that they will always perform well. Make sure that you understand your risks and think up your plans to manage them. And as far as the vendors go, one of the big things that you can really push them and also expect from them should be delivery management. And if you are building, which I said almost do never, if on that 1% of the cases that you're building, make sure you have good documented code. And even if you're not building, if you are implementing, it's still good to have them document what they did. Make sure they have tested stuff. And if it is software code, you should ask them, have they done automated testing? because you don't want your organizational people to be the guinea pigs for that software to be tested, and make sure that they can sustain that software. And that becomes very, very important. That's pretty much the end of our presentation. You can catch us at projecttechfordev.org. There's a contact us page. You can get a lot more information about our platforms that we talked about, our other programs. You're always welcome to drop us a note, and we will respond back very soon. So I'll open up the floor for questions. I think there's also a lot of chat questions if you want to take that up. Piali, if there are questions that we should take that up, you can pipe up.
So we just have one question to answer as of yet. I think the last one, is there a segmentation of nonprofits based on the number of employees working on it? So I would, for the last question that's there, I think a lot, some software, some applications and some SaaS product has limitation, like for 50 employees, this is like the per user cost. For 100 employees, and some platform also doesn't have that type of limitation. They might have a monthly or a yearly retainership. So it all depends. It's not a very yes or no answer. Vinod, what do you think?
Yeah, I would probably agree. Is that Lucky? Do you want to expand a little bit more on if that was what you were looking for, or did we misunderstand your question?
Yes, just want to add one more thing here. I was looking for how you segment when you are designing a new product for a non-profit.
So is this a design from scratch, or
design from this scratch? Suppose you come up with some new software, or you are trying to come up with new software. You may want to do some market segmentation or non-profit segmentations.
Could you expand a little bit more? I guess I'm not following what you are really trying to. You're coming up with a software, and you are saying you want to segment nonprofits.
Yeah. For example, you are designing a chatbot, or you want to design a new software, which is, for example, the last one you did, it's a Glimp, right? Glimic.
Lucky, we couldn't get that word.
I think he's referring to Glyphic.
Glyphic. Glyphic. Okay.
Yeah, Glyphic. So while designing this software, we consider that these are the non-profits is going to use this software. So what are the design consideration you do considering the non-profits? Like we are building for these particular non-profits or these particular non-profits, any group of non-profits.
So I think we're talking about more of like a scale issue, right? And in terms of what you are talking about is like, if you were to design a platform, how do you design that for a particular segment of users? Why are you thinking that there will be a few hundred users on that organization or a few thousand users, and how are you translating your product? Right. So I think that is more of a design question. Typically in our products and stuff, what we are looking at, let's say for Glyphic or development data platform, what we are looking at is not to address 100% of the market. You don't look for that. You look at your segmentation of your nonprofits. What are their use cases? How do you look through their use cases, what their scale is? And you are looking to hit maybe 75, 80% of what that target population is. And that's realistically your best bet. Because if you need to be doing a full-fledged thing, you need significant amount more of resources.
Great. Thanks, thanks, Piali.
Thanks, Lani.
This is Sunita. I have two questions. One is in today's context, what are the most commonly used tools by NGOs? And the second is the two products you showed of Tech for Good. I don't get the names. What's the differentiation? If you can just give us a little bit in-depth view on the tools that you have developed.
Okay. So on the first question, are you looking for tools in a particular space? Or are
Pure
you
M&E,
asking in
pure
general?
M&E off the shelf, what are the most commonly used tools?
Pure M&E off the shelf, typical ones that we have seen for data collection would probably be Kobo, Survey CTO. We have a few NGOs using ComCare, a little bit more limited. There are people using custom software. What else can I think of? There's people using Avni. There's MForm. Any other ones that I'm missing? I think that pretty much sums it. People also do Google Sheets. We've seen that a lot. People have used like SurveyMonkey and stuff if it's just survey oriented from the M&E side. There's also, I think, Alchemer, which is a similar one to SurveyMonkey. So quite varied in terms of what those different things are. And then you were asking about the two different platforms that Tech4Dev supports. One is Glyphic, which is basically a no-code WhatsApp. Simplistic terms, a chatbot builder. Otherwise, you can think of it as a conversation platform that you want to use with your end users and end beneficiaries. So that's Glyphic. Avni is a mobile field data collection system. And then the last one, which is currently kind of under development, we are piloting it, is the development data platform, which essentially tries to allow NGOs which have lots of different data sources to be able to pool their data in one central place and then visualize it using a dashboarding tool.
Thank you.
Yeah, welcome.
There's another question. What's your view on Zoho? And John is asking this. I can take the question. Is that okay?
Yeah, go for it.
John, Zoho has a lot of different solutions. They have an email suite. They have their Zoho Creator platform. Zoho has a form builder that can do pretty much similar what Google Sheets Google Forms can do. So we don't have a particular view on Zoho as a whole because it has a lot of different solutions. And I think if Zoho fits your particular requirement, will be dependent on what the requirement are, and then figuring out the requirement, and then seeing if there's a platform or there's a service in Zoho that fits the bill. So as a whole, Zoho has quite a lot various categories of software. So it's very hard to say it's and have an opinion about Zoho as a whole. Vinod, do you want to add anything?
No. Primarily, I think you will have to kind of evaluate for your use case. Zoho makes good products. We've seen it work in certain cases for particular NGOs. And I can tell you it hasn't also worked for particular products in their Zoho suite for other NGOs. So I think it is going to be a very particular question for, in your case, of what you are using Zoho for, which tool set of Zoho you're using, and whether that's going to be useful or not. And also, I think Zoho has a wide range of products, so it's very, very hard to comment on it. Some products are very nascent, so they're very young, and so the capabilities that you get are limited. So for example, I'll tell you one on the Zoho visualization tool. So if you were to ask me, give me a list of visualization tools, would Zoho be at the top of my list? Probably not, because it's just an up and coming one. Maybe 2 years from now, maybe it might be. But I think there are other products which have been on for quite a while. And so they might actually be in a much more refined stage. And then it's just a question, does it match your requirements?
So Vinod, there's another question on the chat. Any pro bono implementation agencies for software and Microsoft Cloud?
Yeah, I was actually just about going to respond to that, but I don't think there are any pro bono implementers. People have to make money too. So unless you're getting interns or through CSR, it's very doubtful. Salesforce, I think, does have a CSR program. I don't know how easy or difficult it is to get on it. That provides for some amount of pro bono developer support. The big thing that you really have to figure out is, it's fine to get that initial thing, but how are you going to sustain? How are you going to maintain? Who's going to make changes? Because if you do it through CSR or if it's done through pro bono support, most likely you're not going to get those same people back. So somebody's going to have to do that. And how are you going to manage the quality of what somebody did? So has both its pros and cons. You are getting pro bono support, but take it with a bit of salt.
I would also like to add something here. I have an experience with one organization that I'm working with currently, and they have got some pro bono Salesforce development support. So they have got the platform up and running. But once the pro bono support is now ended, they are not sure how to maintain the software. There's a huge cost for the developers' time now, and the organization might not even be able to sustain that cost, because initially they got it done for them pro bono, and they were not thinking about long term. So yeah, as Vinod said, pro bono supports are, when you get pro bono support, also be very cautious about how you're going to sustain once the pro bono support or the free support doesn't ends. Yeah. Okay. We are just scrolling through the questions.
Sanjay has a question.
I think Sangeeta already answered the Zoho question.
So Zoho for non-profit, so I know about Zoho People. Zoho, the HRMS software that Zoho has, it's not free. They have a discount of 15% for NGOs, or on top of whatever is the cost for everyone else, but it's not free. At least Zoho People, and I'm not sure about the other Zoho platforms. They might have a discount, but not free. Okay. Another thing, okay. So Sanjay is asking, which are the recommended platform for survey collection precisely with offline, that works offline? Okay. Again,
Sorry, I just wanted to add to that. I think Alvin had also asked similar question at the time of registration, and his question is also, that data collection tools that can work offline and online more to ensure seamless transfer of data collected daily and during essentially baseline, midline, endline. So from an M&E perspective, that work together.
Yeah.
Okay, so the things that are coming into my mind just because of the offline feature would be Kobo Collect works online and offline both, and the ComCare from Dimagi, they also have a mobile app, and that can also work offline, and it can upload the data once the mobile comes online and all of that. But at the same time, which one fits the organization needs depends on the further requirements and understanding the need. Yeah.
I would add a few more. Survey CTO also does both online and offline. Avni also does online, offline, and also MFORM. These all work online and offline. They all have their strong points and weak points. So we'll just have to figure out based on your cost, your feature set, which one will exactly fit the bill. And these will be on the slides that we are going to send out, and you will see them on the slides.
Vinod, just an add-on to the question, are all of these tools that you just mentioned, are these open source, or do they have a subscription model? Do they work in terms of a user, like one user, or how does it work? Or does it work on the number of entries that you get in?
So they're all kind of different. Good question, actually. They're all very different in terms of how their pricing models are.
Okay.
So ComCare, I know, works on a subscription model. Same thing with Survey CTO. Kobo is kind of in between. If you as an NGO work in particular segments, it can be for free if it comes under, I think, the UNHCR. You have to work in particular NGO sectors. And if you do, it's free. Otherwise, you pay a hosted version. And I think the hosted version is by the number of submissions. Unless they by
the number of submissions, okay.
I'm not too sure about. I think Avni works on number of submissions and number of users also. I think ComCare is based on number of users and the feature set. They have different sets of models: basic, advanced, and professional, where you get different set of features for what you're willing to pay.
Okay.
Some of these are theoretically open source, but there would be no recommendation on my side to manage it. For example, ComCare, which is probably the most advanced, I would probably say, in terms of a feature set for field data collection. It's an amazing tool, has significant amount of features, but quite expensive.
But it's not open source, right? ComCare is not open source.
ComCare is open source.
Is open source.
Yes,
okay.
But theoretically, there is only one company that runs ComCare.
Yeah, it's Dimagi.
Unless you are a very big organization who have like 5 people and you can actually manage a full Comcare installation, it
Mhm.
would not be worth it.
Okay. Right. Got that. Thank you.
Mhm.
Anybody wants to unmute themselves and ask a question? I think Pyali, Vinod, you've answered the questions in the chat box.
Yeah, and just to mention, always feel free to ping us for any of your questions after. And if it need be, we can always get on a call with you and talk to you and kind of discuss about what your needs are. And there are different people on this call too, who are on different platforms, and we can find the right person to route your call to, depending on your question.
I'm just going to ask one question because we have a couple of minutes more. So this came, it is at the time of registration, somebody joined, and unfortunately the person's not on the call, but I think it's, I don't know if it's a question or just something that they wanted to share, that we find it difficult to adopt and disseminate new or basic technology tools within the organization, as there is a limitation of tech skill within our field staff, and language difference. Which creates it a little difficult to embrace technology. So do you want to share something? I think this is something that most of us are facing, right? Language inclusivity. So is there something that you all want to share from your experience working with some NGOs perhaps?
I'll share 2 things, right? One, the language exclusivity part. I think that's something that if you are trying to be inclusive on languages, I think you really have to have that as your core requirement, because I think we've seen this happen, I think, with a few NGOs where they start out with saying, it's okay, chalta hai, we'll just do English. And then it gets introduced, and then they find there's like so much of difficulty for people to do it in Hindi or other languages. And so for me, it's like, it's important that you figure that out at the beginning itself of what your field staff is capable of, figure out what would be their level of comfortableness with it, and use that to drive your requirements for these tools. And if that is an important requirement, there are a few tools that will do that for you. You can adapt software. There are software that have language translation schemes that will do that. So there are definitely scenarios where you can do that. For example, I think even in Glyphic, for example, we have organizations that use it in different languages. But again, you have to make that as core part of your requirements and search for it. So that's one part of the answer. The second part of the answer is on managing change and introducing technology. I think that's a difficult challenge. It's always difficult. So for me, I'll just talk from personal experience, right? So the last 8 months or so, I've been working as a fractional CXO at Sneha in Mumbai, working in the health field. And so we started out with wanting to go from dashboards that had data that was going to be available only once every month to a system where data would be available every day. And initially when we started out, we had this initial idea, okay, maybe we'll just introduce it. And then we were like, okay, maybe this won't go as well. And we need to start slow. And so what we ended up doing was to take a very small section of a program. We implemented only that on dashboards and implemented it for like 10, 15 field level workers, introduced it, got feedback. And this might look like, oh, this took forever to do. But at the end of the day, like right now, we are very close to introducing it for a lot of people for one program, which would be more than 100 field staff. And if that were to work well, it also tells us that people have seen this working. People know what's coming. People have an idea of what is there and what's going to come. And they've also provided their feedback, which we have addressed. So it becomes a lot more easier for them to get on, like they are willing to make that extra effort, because learning new technology always is extra effort. And the thing is that if we also don't think of it from that perspective and say, okay, I'm just going to introduce it, they'll get onto it. It becomes more of a mandate than to say you're doing it intrinsically. And if you are able to do that and accept that change is going to be slow, and that's okay. And if you can do that, I think you are likely to see a more lasting change happen.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that makes a lot of sense. With that, I'm cognizant of the time as well. We're a little over time. And I see another question. I think Prince has a question. Okay, Pyali, do you want to take that? And that could perhaps be the last question.
Yeah, so I'm still reading the question. Let me come to this thing. You say in trial phase, we don't want to be testing it works for us on a solution uses.
Prince, I think a blanket answer would probably be super difficult to give. We have actually no idea of what you are looking for. So it would be difficult, but you're totally welcome to talk to us with a little bit more of the requirements and kind of have a feel for what you are trying to do with Salesforce or Zoho. Very hard to do that from just a few lines, and we're not even too sure exactly what you are using in Salesforce or Zoho to be able to recommend. Pyali, you can add in if you are thinking anything otherwise.
I actually wanted to say the same. Like I'm really like using Salesforce and Zoho as a trial with the pro bono developer. We don't have enough information to be able to give you an approach or suggest you something. So I would say that do feel free to reach out to us after the session or something.
On that note, thank you so much, Vinod, Pyali, for doing this session. And thank you everybody for taking the time out. I was going through a lot of the questions that were shared at the time of registration. I hope we've been able to answer some of them, if not all. And like Vinod and Pyali have been saying, that the topic is such that it might warrant a one-on-one discussion to be able to arrive at solutions that are customized and that work for you. So please feel free to reach out to them. They've shared their IDs, and I'm also going to share this subsequently in the email that I share with all of you. Thank you so much for doing this. Please, all the participants, before you leave, do fill the feedback form. It is going to give all three of us, Vinod, Pyali, and I, a lot of insights, and so we really request you to fill that. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to do this webinar.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thank you, Vinod. Thank you, Pyali. Appreciate it.